Uh, Hello and welcome to everyone. My name is Vlad Mantic. I'm product manager of Databricks Connect, and we are together here with Martin Grund, principal lead engineer on Databricks Connect also. Last year, we introduced Databricks Connect at the Data and AI Summit. Since then, there have been many developments. We went to general availability. We introduced Scala and R with Spark R, and we have streamlined the product. We are super excited to be back here and to tell you more how to efficiently develop with Databricks Connect. Just a quick safe statement. So just a quick question before we start to understand a bit about the audience. Who of you prefers to develop in notebooks? Okay. And who prefers to use IDEs? I think you're in the right session. So, and why do you prefer IDEs? Maybe just voiceover, some good reason. Yeah? IntelliSense, extensions, anything else? Linsing. Unit testing, code modularization. Exactly. So this is what we hear from our customers. Thank you very much. They love to develop with IDEs because it is the place they have been used to, and because all of these amazing features that IDE brings, like IntelliSense, much easier to debug, code modularization, support for refactoring, etc. Some even told us about the Copilot. And why is this important? Because it enables you to use state-of-the-art software engineering practices like debugging and unit testing, as you mentioned. Okay, but why Databricks Connect? So the importance of Databricks Connect is that it allows you to develop from your IDE, your Spark code, and use the state-of-the-art development practices. So it also allows you to do debugging with interactive debugging and step through, and you are really developing on the target platform. So you have high production fidelity. You are using the data that you will use in the production and with the same configurations. And what is also important is we saw that there are a lot of customers that are using Databricks Connect to integrate their data applications to Databricks so they can access their data from their application and leverage the Spark engine. So let's go through and have a quick walk about how to set up your Databricks Connect in your IDE with PyCharm, and also some examples about how to debug. So let's imagine you're a data practitioner, like probably most of you, and you would like to develop your Spark codes from your IDE that eventually will run your workloads in your Databricks cluster. So first of all, you will need to create this a cluster. So you go to your workspace user interface, you click on compute, on clusters. You have to fill a lot of parameters and knobs like what is your DBR, what is the access mode, the cluster size, and if you have any advanced configuration. In some cases, you may need even ask to your admin to do that for you because you don't have the policies and the credentials for that. So you put the name of the cluster and you start a cluster. Now you have to wait. So you have to wait 5 to 10 minutes so the cluster starts. So meanwhile, you go and take your URL from your workspace that you will need to set up your connection when you're using DB Connect. And going back to your IDE, your local machine, when you will be developing, for example, VS Code, PyCharm, in any of them, you will create a virtual environment. You install Databricks Connect, just pip install DB Connect. This is the last version that we have right now for classic compute. And you activate the virtual environment. Now, you need to create a connection. So you have to set up your connection between your IDE that is using DB Connect and your Databricks workspace and the cluster you're running. So for that, you have several options. You can use environment variables. You can do it directly in the code. Or the one that we are going to show here is to use a configuration profile that you can reuse between different projects and yeah. And so to do that, there is a wizard in the CLI, in the Databricks CLI, that can help you to set up that configuration profile so that you don't have to like type in or have any errors. So how do you do that? You install the Databricks CLI. Then you run with this syntax and you start your wizard. Basically, what you will need to put down there, what you see in blue, is your workspace URL that we copied before. Once you have that, you just click through and you fill all the information. So like the profile name, like we call it default, and your authentication, which in this case we will use OAuth. So basically you will click through, there will be a web browser that appears, and you will just fill your name and credential the same as you have when you enter your workspace. And eventually you will have a drop-down menu where you can put your cluster and choose your cluster name. Okay, so now we are set, and you have your authentication set and the connection is prepared. So you open your IDE, and we are going to create a session. We can use a notebook, or you can just import your Databricks library, and you create the Spark session, as you see there, using the profile that we have created before. So this profile is the one that will enable to create the connection. I just put my Spark code, and I am done. I'm set. I can just run. So Martin, can you show us maybe some more detailed examples?
All right. So what I'm going to show you is, I'm going to be very honest and see if I click. Does the video play? Let me see. I have to click somewhere. Do I click here? All right. As you see, it's like...
To go left, maybe or right to the other screen.
Let's find the screen. Here we go. All right. So I'm really bad at doing live demos. So for that reason, I usually do videos. So what I want to show you is here, essentially, you see PyCharm. There's no extra plugin needed, nothing special set up. But at the same time, we created our Spark session, and now we can step through this code. So in this case, I have essentially kind of a unit test that runs, and I see something is wrong. The biggest benefit of using an IDE, like with all these kind of interactive debugging tools, is that there's a lot of things that are built into the experience that make it easy for you to reason about the code. But usually when you're running PySpark applications, like, hey, how do I reason about my data at the same time as I'm reasoning about my code? And for that reason, what DB Connect enables you is I can step through this code, I can look at all of the data frames. And if you've been using data frames a lot and you haven't really thought about this, is every time you're creating a new data frame, you're essentially copying the execution plan of the previous one. So you can compare two data frames and you can look at this, hey, why did I have 10 rows here and now I have only 1 row? I was expecting 5 rows. And this makes it really easy to interactively work through this. And what you can see here is again, there's nothing special that is configured in DB Connect or in PyCharm. This is really just the Python environment that you're using. I'm connecting using OAuth to my workspace. I don't have to set any long-lived credentials. And I think this makes it really convenient to work with that. All right. Now I need to mouse again on this side. All right. So, but how does it actually work behind the scenes? And I hope that everybody today was in the keynote from Renault and has seen a different version of this picture already. So what powers all of these things behind the scenes is Spark Connect. Spark Connect was designed to be a lightweight abstraction of the data frame API that then allows you to connect to Spark from anywhere. And this is not just for IDEs and local development. This is, as well as you saw today from the POSIT side, this is to allow you to connect from any other language that doesn't even have a JVM interconnection. The underlying fundamental principles of this is essentially that when we looked at the APIs of the data frame, it was a very declarative way of reasoning about data. So in the same way as SQL is a declarative approach to define what you want to have as an output without saying how, data frames operate on the same kind of principle. So the way that it works is essentially we're translating the data frame APIs into what we call an unresolved logical plan or an unresolved path plan. It's very similar to the first stage in SQL processing, essentially. We're translating this into protobuf messages, sending this over the wire, and then it gets translated into the actual Catalyst plans in Spark, executed, and you have the full benefits of all of the execution in Spark, optimization, and everything. And on the way back, we return the data as arrow, so you can plug it into ProductDB if you want, for all it matters, and continue with the query execution. The way that Databricks Connect is actually built is that it leverages the same pieces as Spark Connect. The only difference is that we are adding a little bit on top for authentication and authorization. So this is really just the integration with OAuth or pet tokens, Unity catalog. These are the pieces that are not part of the protocol, but they're just part of the deployment itself. And that's why, it's called Databricks Connect. And as I already said, like everything is already built on Spark Connect. It's like the same code that you would run locally. It works remotely. You can even use the open source Spark Connect client to connect to Databricks. It all works. There's nothing fundamentally different. So at the high level, this means you can use Databricks from anywhere. It's not just debugging. It's not just IDEs and development from IDEs, but it's as well building interactive data applications with very few lines of code. So you've seen Ploty, Posit has like Shiny. There are all of these kind of ways of like building these kind of apps, and they're already written in Python. So if you're already a Python native person, so why do you really want to now all of a sudden like switch back to SQL or like find a different connectivity? And this is really the biggest benefit that you have, is that you can use your knowledge already about manipulating and working with data. You can use this as well in apps. And lastly, we have different collaborations with partners that are providing, already logic to connect to Spark. Sometimes they want to provide breakouts of like, how can you use Python to connect to Spark in their world? And then there are all of these kind of different ways for them to use Spark. All right. I want to give you one example of like how building an app with DB Connect can become so much simpler than doing this compared to like traditional ways. And so what I've done here is, I was trying to figure out like what's the shortest Flask app that I can build that actually makes somewhat sense. And essentially I was saying, okay, so we have our taxi data set, let's just render a magic table on the screen and let's have a look at this. And I was actually able to fit the whole code more or less on a single slide. And what you can see here is on the left side, I have my PySpark code that uses DB Connect. On the right-hand side, I have SQLite because I'm just too lazy, but it's essentially the same pattern, so it's just SQL. And the biggest part that you get with DB Connect and PySpark in general in this case is you're avoiding this impedance mismatch between the different programming languages, because you don't have to switch between this is SQL, this is not SQL, and you can simply use your known idioms. And where does this make the biggest difference? So if you look here, again, is this the best example in the world? No. You could say, well, I want to use like an ORM mapper or something, but forget this for a second. Well, it's like we're all data scientists, so to say, like nobody has time to do this right. So, like this is probably the first and the last app that, your intern writes and then deploys in production. So essentially what you're seeing is, okay, so now I have a parameter that I'm reading from my URL, and now I'm using this to apply a filter. On the left-hand side, you see very easy, df.where.filter aggregate looks same. On the right-hand side, you have the same thing, but now, okay, if I do not already have a filter present, I have to add this where, and then I have to make sure that I add all the spaces in my code. Is this a contrived example? Maybe. But at the end of the day, what you see is, and that's the core part, is that you're appending parameters, you're manipulating strings, and this makes it really hard. But what gets even worse is like, now imagine that you have to debug this because something is wrong. All right, it's a Python app. I can run this in PyCharm. I can put a breakpoint there. All right, let's put a breakpoint there. So now what do you think? Like, what do you get when you set a breakpoint in this application at these more or less the same place in the code? Like, how do you reason about like what's going on the left side? And how do you reason about what's going on the right side? On the right-hand side, you basically have half of the string. So, but is this all of the string, some of the string? Like if I have nested CTEs, like can this actually compile? Is this syntactically correct? You don't know. On the left-hand side, you have a data frame. You can look at this data frame before, you can look at this data frame after, and like actually reason about this. So how does it look like in PyCharm? So I added this slide last minute before the talk, and I was like, how the hell do I configure a Flask app in PyCharm? Apparently it's possible, and much easier than I thought. And I set a breakpoint and said, okay. And as you can see, like PyCharm gives you all of this fancy, line highlighting of like all of the variables that are already created. And I can see my data frame, I can see the schema, I can see the string representation, and I can actually work with this, which makes it like so much easier, like if this app would be more complex, to actually debug this and like step through this. And with that, I want to give back to Vlado. Yeah. But like, how can we be more efficient than that?
Yeah, so how could be more efficient? So we have seen right now how we can use Databricks Connect which different applications, some examples. But Martin, what is the most annoying thing you're experiencing when developing with Databricks from an IDE?
The most annoying thing, I mean, that's a hard question. I mean, I work for Databricks, so I don't really have a perfect answer. But if I were have to give one answer, is like, you have to start a cluster. No, and like, who doesn't like, you're starting a cluster, it takes 5 to 6 minutes to start. And now some admin said like the auto termination is 10 minutes. And and then, like you're saying, man, like I have to start this cluster, it's time to get a coffee. So you start the cluster, you go get a coffee because you go to Blue Bottle, these guys are just insanely slow. And then you come back like 15 minutes later and your cluster is down again. And you're starting it again. So that's the most annoying thing.
Very good. So what if you will never have to wait for a cluster startup? This is currently possible. Actually, if you have heard the talk of Ali, we already have serverless compute in Databricks. You can, if you enable it in your workspace, you can have instantaneously compute with Spark available. This is already in the public preview, and soon it will be in general availability. So how it works, you just enable your serverless compute in your workspace, you open a notebook, and you just code. And it's immediately working. You don't need to wait anything, no cluster configuration, no cluster ID, no asking your admin. It's scalable, and it's efficient. And you only pay for the queries that you are running. It's as simple as using Databricks SQL, serverless, but with the power of PySpark and Python. So imagine that right now you could also connect from an IDE, not only from the notebooks in Databricks. So we would like to introduce Serverless Databricks Connect. What does it mean? It means that you can use Databricks Connect and connect to your endpoint in your workspace of serverless compute. This brings the best of the both worlds, the world of the IDEs, data applications, partners, and serverless compute. So you can use all of the both together. So how I can do it? Very easy. You first enable serverless compute in your workspace. You update your client side or your local machine to the last version, which is enabled for serverless compute. And you just update the API in your code there when you're creating the Spark session, as you can see marked in blue, like this, to ensure that you're connecting to a serverless compute instead of a classic cluster. You don't need to change the code. You don't need to start a cluster. You can reuse all your authentication you have before. If you use environment variables, this will work. If you're using inline in the code configuration also, or if you use your profile with like the one we showed before, that will also work. Let's see.
For some reason, there's a video. Oh, no, the video is there.
Okay, so so how does it work? It's so simple. You just change your cluster ID to the serverless, and then you can have all the powers of Databricks Connect. Everything that Martin explains you, it will just work. You can set breakpoints, you can interact with variables and investigate your code and do debugging. Everything is available. You can use all of the state-of-the-art, best engineering practices, and with serverless. Now, that's very good, but what are the benefits? Okay, now I have to come back.
You have to move the mouse to the left. One more.
Okay, sorry for this. So what are the benefits? So first of all, it's much easier setup. No cluster IDs, no cluster creation. It's much easier. Second is much more efficient. So you have the power of serverless. Everything that's bringing you serverless compute, you have it also with Databricks Connect. So you have instant access. You don't have to have a cluster running 24/7, which can be idle or not used, or you have to wait all the time for the cluster startup. This is super convenient, especially for data applications, because we have seen some customers telling us, oh, look, I have to have my cluster on Databricks running all the time. So if I have a data app that is integrated to Databricks with DB Connect, you have to have your cluster running constantly. Or you have like opening hours, like a shop. So my app is just accessible between 5 and 7 when I have my cluster available. otherwise it's not accessible. For these cases, you can just use serverless. It will spin up and start compute immediately when you need it, and will just shut it down when you don't use it. And the best of it is also dynamically scalable. So it will adjust the compute to the workload size and the data. And interestingly, also, you pay only what you use. You're not paying for idle clusters. Also, you're not paying for big clusters when you will need it and small cluster when you don't. So you will need to be changing cluster or paying too much. So it's just pay for what you're using and your Spark queries. And the cost is the same as for serverless interactive that you currently have when you're using notebooks or from the Databricks workspace. So we have seen so far serverless, some examples, but maybe can we see more examples, Marty, about how to use serverless from everywhere?
All right, serverless from everywhere. So who has ever used other notebook solutions than Databricks? Like anything that comes to mind? Yes? Snowflake? Nah. Okay, I don't have a good example for that one, but I could show it like if I had a Snowflake account. Obviously, I'm not allowed to know. Any other like notebook stuff? Own custom notebooks, custom deployed Jupyter Enterprise. Anybody using Google Colab at some point in time? Yes, I see some people nodding. Okay, Hex. I heard this was the new kid on the block last year. Apparently it's no longer new. Okay. All right, so because I was thinking like, how do I show you like I'm not lying here and this is just like magic. So essentially I was like, here I have a video that shows you the full process of going in an empty notebook, installing the DB Connect package, and then running a query. And I have to set up some authentication mechanisms, but I mean, that's more or less like free. So again, installing the package takes the longest time on this. I mean, this whole video is, I think, like 35-ish seconds. And I think it spends like 29 in like installing the Python package. But it's already running. So all of a sudden, I use Google Colab. Yes, no problem. I can use DB Connect. I can use my my Spark cluster from anywhere, my data, my governed UC data, and it's always available. All right. Maybe if you don't like, why is this so weird? I don't understand this. All right, let's try this one. All right, so maybe you don't like Google Colab and you like Hex more. And here I have this, I mean, yours looks all the same, huh? But again, same thing. I have a notebook, I have pip install, I do my query, and within like 500 milliseconds, I get a response back. And this is really kind of the power and the magic of this. Is like it's so hard to demo. You know, like how do I show you something that is not there? You know, it's like there's no cluster startup. I don't need to configure anything. I don't need to set up auto scaling. I don't need to set up like anything. And I think this makes it. You know, I'm saying like, what the hell am I doing? Like, how do I show you that this is actually a real thing? All right. All right. To summarize, essentially, you can use Databricks Connect to build, you know, on your lakehouse in Databricks really, really fast and efficient. You can use DB Connect to access the full power of Spark from anywhere. Again, this is powered by Spark Connect under the hood. So for those that might not know, so for example, there's a Rust implementation of Spark Connect that you can use. And like if you're building a Rust application, or if you want to compile this to WASM and then to TypeScript, I mean, so this is really the same kind of openness that we always advocate is available as well via DB Connect. You can authenticate. We support all of the most important like authentication mechanisms so that the admins are happy. And you know, with the newest edition of serverless, it's really like brings all of the performance and the efficiency to this. No more clusters, no more cluster IDs. It's immediate response and scalability. And if you're interested in this, please have a look at our Git examples that we have that show you how to build, you know, like apps with DB Connect. So there's an example for an ETL pipeline. There's an example for a Ploty app. And if you're interested in previewing the Serverless DB Connect one, there's a sign-up form as well. We're going to public preview soon. It's probably taking like a few more days. But it's going to become very soon, and then you can just use this as soon as you have enabled serverless in your account. And with that, we're done, and like we're here to answer all of the questions that you might have. And I'm supposed to show this slide as well. Please tell us what you think about this talk. Tell us how awesome we are.
Great. We are right in time. Thanks again for Martin and Valendo for the amazing talk. Enjoy the rest of your Summit.
Thank you.